Hi Em, how have you been? Have you tried out the vegetarian life?
I tried it for the last week, like you insisted.
Well, how did it go?
Oh, it was miserable. You know how much I love food. Life is barely worth living without fried chicken.
Sorry, it's partly my fault. I could have left you with some advice on how to find yummy plant-based meals.
Are there any such things? I can't keep eating piles of broccoli and lettuce.
Of course there are. You seem to like the meals here well enough.
Yeah, that's true. This restaurant is pretty good.
Most vegetarian restaurants are. They seem to put more thought into their food than the average conventional restaurant.
Yeah, but I can't afford to keep eating out.
That's understandable. Fortunately, you can eat at home for a lot less if you go vegetarian, since vegetables are cheaper than meat. You know, I have a great carrot ginger soup that I can make at home. I'll send you the recipe.
Okay, but I can't be relying on you for advice every time I want to cook a meal. Plus, I'm busy. I can't spend a whole lot of time on cooking.
Just type easy vegan meals into a search engine anytime you want a new idea. You'll get plenty of great suggestions.
Wait, did you say vegan? I thought I just had to give up meat. You mean I have to give up eggs and dairy too?
They come from factory farms too. If you buy them, you're paying people to do factory farming.
But I love cheese.
You can get vegan cheese.
Vegan cheese? What the heck is that?
It's a product that looks and tastes like cheese but with no animal products, usually made from cashews.
I'm skeptical.
You remember the cheese we had at the reception on Friday after the philosophy colloquium?
Yeah, I remember. That stuff was good. You see, that's why I can't give up dairy.
That was vegan cheese.
Really? Are they all that good?
Some are better than others. Just find the ones you like. There are vegan substitutes for most animal products.
But where am I going to get enough protein in my diet?
Beans, nuts, peanut butter, also bivalves.
What's bivalve?
You know, clams, mussels, scallops.
Wait a minute. You eat clams? Clams are animals. You're no vegan. You're not even a vegetarian.
Bivalves have no brains.
So what? They're still alive, and people have to murder them to satisfy your appetite. You're no better than me with my chicken and hamburgers.
I don't think you understood any of the preceding arguments. None of the arguments were about life. After all, plants are alive too. So are bacteria. So are cancer cells.
So you don't think that life has intrinsic value?
I'm not making any claims about that. My argument was simply that it's wrong to inflict severe pain and suffering for no good reason.
So why do you think it's okay to inflict pain on plants and clams, you evil oppressor?
I don't think that. I think it's impossible to inflict pain on plants or clams.
How do you know that?
Pain is caused by the electrical impulses from nerve endings reaching your brain. If the impulses don't reach your brain, you don't feel any pain. That's known empirically. So if you didn't even have a brain, then you couldn't feel pain at all.
Sure, that may be the current scientific understanding, but you can't be 100% certain of that. Maybe there's some other way to have pain, and plants and clams are having pain all the time.
And maybe the chair you're sitting on is in great agony. No way to prove it isn't, but we have no reason to think so, and we have to sit somewhere.
Okay, I don't really think plants are conscious. I was kidding. But I don't see why someone couldn't make an argument similar to your early argument from risk to show that we can't eat plants.
How would that argument go?
You know, we're killing so many plants every year that if there's even a 1% chance that plants feel pain when they're killed, we have to stop the practice.
And the person making this argument would be saying that we should not eat anything?
Maybe. Maybe we're ethically obliged to commit suicide.
Okay, then here's how that argument would be different from my argument. Number one, that argument is asking us to sacrifice our lives. My argument is only asking you to give up a little pleasure at mealtimes. And that's because I think it's wrong to inflict suffering for no good reason.
So it's okay to hurt others in order to survive, but not to get more pleasure for yourself.
In general, it's much more likely to be okay. Now, here's the second difference. It is virtually certain that animals feel pain. That's clearly over 99% probable. But it is also virtually certain that plants don't. Since plants have no nervous system, the probability that they feel pain is very much lower than 1%.
Okay, but you've been misusing the word vegetarian. Vegetarian means a person who eats only plants. Clams and oysters aren't plants.
I don't care what word you use. You can call it vegetarianism, compassionate eating, or whatever you want, as long as you stop supporting animal cruelty.
Alright, but what about insects? Plant farming kills trillions of insects every year, mostly with pesticides. Surely we're going to have to stop killing bugs, right?
Shouldn't I make the same points here? 1. The costs of giving up killing insects are much higher than the costs of giving up meat eating. 2. It's much less likely that insects feel pain. Plus, number 3, we aren't raising insects in horrible conditions for their whole lives before killing them, as in factory farming. And 4, animal farming requires killing insects, as well as plants, in addition to the animals directly killed for meat, so plant farming is still better.
Wait, how does animal farming kill insects and plants?
To raise an animal, you have to feed it vegetable foods, which come from farms. The amount of food you then get out of the animal is less than the amount of food that went into raising it. So any problem with plant farming is also a problem with animal farming, in addition to all the problems with animal farms that we've already discussed.
What do you mean about the cost of giving up killing insects being much higher?
Virtually all of modern life kills insects. You can't drive a car without killing some. You can barely walk without killing them.
Okay, so maybe giving up all killing would be too demanding. But surely we should still give up, say, using pesticides on farms, right? Because we could buy organic foods instead.
If you want to argue for that, go ahead. But I think you're changing the subject. Let's first agree to give up buying factory-farmed meat. Then we can worry about more controversial cases.
But I've seen you eating conventionally raised vegetables. Right there! I bet some of those vegetables are conventional.
Now you're resorting to argument ad hominem. You're accusing me of being bad or hypocritical or something instead of just focusing on the arguments.
Shouldn't I expect the proponents of a theory to be consistent?
Whether or not I personally act in the morally best way is irrelevant to the truth of the moral principles we've been discussing. Even if I'm as hypocritical as you claim, that wouldn't make it okay for you to keep buying meat. It's just a way to distract yourself from the moral issue about your own behaviour.
But I don't think it's irrelevant, because I think your failure to care about insects shows that you don't really believe the moral views you've been advancing.
If I don't believe them, then why have I been eating vegan for the last 3 years? And why have I been telling you all these arguments? Am I just a crazy liar?
Okay, you believe them on one level, but on another level, you don't completely believe them because you haven't fully integrated them into your thinking and your lifestyle. If you really fully believe that species membership doesn't matter, then you'd care more about insects.
So you think I'm an unconscious speciesist?
That's a good way to put it.
Maybe. There are also experiments that suggest that most of us are unconscious racists, but that doesn't show that such attitudes are correct or morally okay.
No, it doesn't show that. But one explanation for why you haven't rooted out all of your speciesist prejudices is that they're actually correct.
I guess that's a possible explanation, but you'd have to think that unconscious biases are more reliable than conclusions of conscious reasoning. And we talked last time about the biases that may be distorting our judgment.
Alright, maybe your behaviour doesn't give us a good reason for rejecting your philosophical arguments. But I still want to know, should we be a lot more careful about protecting insects?
If insects were sentient like cows, then I'd say sure.
Why don't you think insects are sentient? They've got eyes and other sense organs, so they must have sensations.
3 reasons. 1, they don't have nociceptors.
What? Nociceptors? What?
Nociceptors, the kind of nerve cells that sense pain. They don't have them. 2nd, they have drastically simpler central nervous systems, like 100,000 times simpler.
Maybe you only need a simple nervous system to have pain.
But you're going to have a hard time explaining the 3rd point. Insects don't show normal pain behavior. An insect with a crushed leg keeps applying the same force to that leg. Insects will keep eating, mating, or whatever they're doing, even when badly injured, even while another creature is eating them.
Okay, so there's a pretty good case that they don't feel pain. But there's still some chance of it, right?
I think you're engaging in distraction again. If you want to become a bug activist, go ahead. But first, let's agree to give up the much more clearly wrong practice of buying meat from factory farms.
Alright, maybe I should give up on factory farm meat. What if I buy free-range meat instead?
Unfortunately, companies can legally call their products free-range and still have a lot of cruelty. If you want humanely made products, you have to look for things that are certified by an animal welfare organization. For example, you can look for the Certified Humane logo.
Then it'll be ethical to buy it?
Then it might be ethical. Buying from factory farms is clearly wrong. Buying humane certified meat might be acceptable. Depends on whether you believe in animal rights or not.
Well, how come we haven't been talking about that?
I focus on factory farming because it's the source of nearly all animal products. I figure I should first try to dissuade people from doing the clearly terrible thing that almost everyone is doing every day, buying from factory farms, before worrying about something that a tiny minority of people are doing that's much less bad but might still be unethical, buying from humane farms.
I see. But do you buy humane certified meat?
I don't buy it because I don't know if it is ethical. I figure that if I don't know, I shouldn't do it.
Why don't you know?
Well, I'd have to figure out whether it's permissible to kill animals humanely for food. For that, I'd have to figure out whether they have a right to life. And for that, I guess I'd first have to figure out what the basis is for the right to life in general.
Isn't that what we have moral philosophers for?
Yeah, but the moral philosophers don't agree.
Professor Tooley told me that the right to life is based on one's conception of oneself as a subject of experience continuing through time.
That's one theory. Another view is that the right to life rests on one's being the subject of a life that matters to oneself. Or perhaps it rests on one's having the potential for a human-like future. Or perhaps there aren't any such things as rights in the first place.
Why don't we just figure out which theory is true?
Easier said than done. The leading experts can't agree, so it seems unlikely that we can settle it here. If we start on that, we'll just argue about that forever.
Don't be so pessimistic. Maybe we're better at this than the leading experts.
Really? Remember that time when we started talking about the definition of knowledge?
Yeah, that was a great conversation.
A great conversation that went on for 3 hours. It only stopped because you had to leave.
Yeah, I still want to raise more objections to your last theory on that.
And then there was that time we started talking about free will.
Another great conversation.
That went on for 5.5 hours, and we never reached any agreement.
Okay, so we're probably not going to deduce the correct ethical theory. But how can we know buying meat is wrong without knowing the correct ethical theory?
Because the argument against meat rests on intuitive, very widely shared moral beliefs, like it's wrong to inflict a lot of suffering for no good reason, and it's wrong to pay people for immoral behavior. Any reasonable ethical theory is going to agree with those.
Okay, but all of your arguments assume that there are objective moral truths, don't they? That's controversial.
Do all moral arguments assume that there are objective moral truths?
I don't think so.
Then mine doesn't either.
Why do you say that?
Because I don't see how my argument differs from any ordinary moral argument. It's up to you to tell me how I presupposed objective values in a way that other moral arguments don't.
Maybe because you're arguing for a radical revision of our practices. On some theories, morality is just based on social practices.
Could that view have been used to defend slavery back when that was the practice? The oppression of women? Medieval torture?
I guess it might.
Okay, if my argument against meat eating is only as strong as the arguments against slavery were, and if the people who should disagree with me are people who would think we had no reason to give up slavery, I'm okay with that.
Well, maybe slavery was wrong, even though it fit with the practices of the time, because it conflicted with some deeper values held by society.
Like what?
Maybe there were deeper values of liberty and autonomy, and a consistent application of those values, without making arbitrary distinctions, required granting freedom to slaves.
In that case, I think factory farming is also wrong because it conflicts with deeper values of our society, like the deeper values of compassion and not inflicting needless suffering. That's just as plausible as the story about slavery.
I guess so, but so much seems uncertain in this area. I'm not sure it's worth changing my lifestyle, when the experts can't even agree on whether there are any moral facts, whether they're dependent on conventions and so on.
This sort of skepticism only seems to come up when people are criticized for behavior that they don't want to change, and they run out of ways trying to defend it. Only then do you start feeling skeptical about morality. The rest of the time, you have no trouble accepting moral judgments.
What do you mean? I don't go around judging people all the time.
Let me give you an example. Say person A is suing person B, and we're on the jury. We're supposed to decide if B wronged A in a way that demands compensation.
Isn't the jury just supposed to decide whether B did something illegal?
Just assume that the law says A is entitled to compensation only if B wronged A.
Okay.
It turns out that what B did was to smash A's car with a sledgehammer just for fun, causing $2,000 worth of damage. Several witnesses saw it.
Sounds like an easy case. A gets $2,000.
Not so fast. There are a few philosophers in the jury room, a metaphysician, a political theorist, an epistemologist, and an ethicist. The metaphysician argues that B isn't responsible for his action because there's no such thing as free will.
I guess that could make sense.
The political theorist says B's action wasn't wrong because property rights are illegitimate. The epistemologist says that we can't accept the eyewitness's testimony until we first prove that the senses are reliable. Finally, the ethicist says that there are no moral facts, so B can't have done anything wrong.
I guess this is why they don't usually allow philosophers on the jury.
No doubt. So how would you vote?
If I agreed with one of those philosophers, I'd have to support the defendant.
Right, but how would you actually vote? Would you say B did nothing wrong?
No. Personally, I'd still vote to award $2,000 to A.
So, skeptical philosophical theories don't prevent you from making moral judgments about other people's behavior.
No.
In fact, when I first told you the story, you said it sounded like an easy case.
Yeah, it did.
Well, the case of ethical vegetarianism is just as easy. There's no more doubt about the wrongness of meat eating than there is about the wrongness of smashing someone's car for the fun of it, or the wrongness of beating children, or killing people for money, or any other paradigm wrong. You wouldn't go ahead and do those things just because there might not be any moral facts, would you?
No, but you really think being a vegetarian is a simple, clear decision, just like deciding not to kill people for money?
Basically, yeah. At its heart, the question is, do I support something that causes enormous pain and suffering for the sake of minor benefits for me? That's it. It's not, are human lives more valuable than animal lives? It's not, are there objective values, or are there rights, or what's the basis for rights? It's just about causing great suffering for small gains.
Well, your arguments sound reasonable and all, but I just don't think I can give up on meat. It's too difficult, and I'm weak-willed.
I don't think that's true.
I'm telling you, I'm not ready to give up meat. You think I'm lying?
I don't think you're lying, but people are often mistaken about why they do what they do. If you keep eating meat, it won't be because it was too difficult to give it up.
What do you mean?
Imagine the next time you're in a restaurant, and you're thinking of ordering a meat dish. Imagine I showed up just before you order, and I offer you $20 to order a vegetarian dish instead.
$20? That would be like getting a free meal at most places, plus some extra cash.
Would you take it?
Sure.
So it's not really very difficult to refrain from meat eating. It can't be very hard if just paying $20 gets you to do it.
Sure, it would be easy to forego one time, but after going for a few weeks without it, it would get harder, as I started to miss the taste. Don't you find it a terrible struggle to stay vegan?
No, not really.
You must have an iron will, day in, day out, seeing delicious meat around you. What's your secret?
I don't deliberate. I don't decide every time I eat whether to be vegan. If I had to decide every time, I imagine that would be hard.
Well, why don't you deliberate about it? I thought about it many times over the past week.
I don't deliberate about whether to do things that are wrong. I decided once, 3 years ago, that buying meat was wrong. And I've had no reason to reopen the issue, so I don't have to struggle with any decision.
Oh, I bet you do some wrong things from time to time. Come on.
Let me rephrase. I don't deliberate about doing things that I see as terrible. Stealing paper clips, sure. Mugging people? No way. Not even thinking about it.
I don't know if it's possible for me to get in that state of mind.
When you see an attractive person, do you have to struggle to decide whether to grope them?
I would never do that.
Or when someone pisses you off, do you have to struggle whether to smack their face?
Not that either.
Right. You already know that you won't do things like that, so there's no deliberation and no internal struggle.
I just haven't been able to get in that state of mind with this issue. This past week was so hard. I'm really hankering for a steak now.
Here's another hypothetical. You've gone without meat for 3 weeks, so you're hankering for a steak. Like now, only more so. We're out to lunch with Professor Carney, and he's got a steak on his plate. He likes to cut his food up into bite-sized pieces. You could reach over, spear a piece with your fork, and eat it before he can stop you. Assume that this is the only way for you to get some steak. Do you do it?
Would that be unethical, on your view? He already ordered it.
Never mind that. I'm not asking you what you should do. I'm asking a psychological question. Do you think you would, in fact, grab a piece of Carney's steak?
I think he'd get mad if I did that.
Okay, what if he's gone for a bathroom break, so he won't even see you?
He might notice when he gets back.
He probably won't notice one piece. Even if he does, what's he gonna do?
Well, maybe I would take it then.
Come on. Have you ever done something like that?
Okay, fine. I wouldn't take it.
Why not?
I don't know. People just don't do things like that.
Even though you have this supposedly irresistible need for steak.
Maybe you're just showing off the power of social conventions. I have 2 powerful urges, but the urge to follow conventions is so strong that I can't take the steak.
Okay, let's say you ask Bob for a piece of his steak. He offers to sell it to you for $20. Nothing wrong with accepting that offer, as far as society is concerned, right?
It's pretty weird, but not exactly socially unacceptable.
You happen to have $20 in your pocket. Do you hand it over?
$20 for one bite? That's totally unreasonable.
But what about your powerful, nearly irresistible steak urge?
One bite just wouldn't satisfy it anyway.
Okay, what if he offers to sell you the whole steak for, say, $100?
That's a bit much.
Notice how this is different from, say, a drug addict. The drug addict really would hand over $100 to get his fix. That's because addicts really have overpowering urges. You, however, do not.
Okay, fine. I guess it's not all that difficult to refrain from eating meat. I guess it's just that I'm a selfish jerk. Thanks for pointing that one out.
I don't think that's it either. Here's another hypothetical. You're in a library late at night. You see a desk where another student has been studying. The student has gone off to the bathroom and left his backpack there, with his wallet sitting on top. You could grab the wallet and leave, and no one would catch you. Do you take it?
Hey, I'm no thief.
Good, but a real selfish jerk would take it, right?
I guess so. Then what are you saying explains my choices?
Social conformity. Stealing is disapproved of in our society, and you've internalized that. Meat eating isn't, and almost everyone around you is doing it. That's why you keep eating meat, no matter how wrong it is, but you won't steal, no matter how much it would benefit you.
So it's mostly peer pressure?
Yes. Now you understand why I was getting all judgy on you earlier.
You've been trying to exert peer pressure on me?
That's the main way morality is enforced in human societies. Other people express disapproval of bad behavior, and it makes us want to avoid that behavior. If there's no disapproval, then most of us keep doing it. That's why the people who know that a practice is wrong have to keep saying so.
You're making humans sound kind of weak, like we just do whatever we see other people doing, however wrong it is.
Pretty much. Think about cases like Nazi Germany. Ordinary, average Germans, who never committed a crime before, found themselves helping to mass murder Jews. Their natural resistance to killing was overcome, mainly by social pressure.
Yeah, Germans back then sucked, didn't they?
Not just Germans back then. If you lived in the American South in the 1800s, you'd probably have accepted slavery as perfectly natural.
Yeah, you talked about that before when you were talking about the status quo bias. But what if you've already accepted that meat eating is wrong, but you just can't give it up?
That happened with slavery too. Thomas Jefferson was a big philosophical opponent of slavery, yet he was also a slave master. If Jefferson were alive today, do you think he would still have slaves?
I assume not. Only a terrible person would hold slaves today. But what are you getting at?
It's about social conformity. Jefferson couldn't give up his slaves, not because he had some powerful urge to be a slave master, and not even just because it would be so much against his interests, though it would have been, but because other people in his society had slaves and accepted the practice. That undermined his moral motivation. If he lived today, he wouldn't dream of owning other people because it's so uniformly disapproved.
Is this all supposed to help me give up meat?
Yeah, if you think that you can't do it because you have these overpowering carnivorous urges, or even that you're just utterly selfish, then it's unlikely that you'll make the effort. But once you realize that you make comparable sacrifices to your interests all the time, and it's not that difficult, then you're more likely to do it. The reason you make other sacrifices, but you're not making this sacrifice, is a really bad reason. Not enough other people are pressuring you.
You know, you vegans are really preachy and moralistic. I'm not sure I want to be like you.
Well, I hope you understand now why we are so moralistic, as you put it.
Because you have a character flaw that makes you take pleasure in controlling other people and feeling superior to them?
God, no. I wish I didn't have to do any of this. I wish the meat industry were ethical so I could buy their products, or at least that everyone knew it was unethical so I wouldn't have to keep talking about it and having tensions with other people.
You mean being vegetarian causes other people to get mad at you?
Not exactly. Most people respect my dietary choices as long as I'm quiet about it. It's when I start talking about how they should stop eating meat that people get angry.
What do they do?
Sometimes they talk about how vegans are excessively moralistic or self-satisfied, discounting the possibility that vegans sincerely care about the welfare of animals. Or they sarcastically pose as broccoli rights advocates. Or they start bragging aggressively about how much they love bacon.
Well, when you call people immoral, you have to expect them to retaliate.
I wouldn't. When you meet a devout Catholic, do you start going on about how much you love abortion and you hope to perform a few abortions later that day?
Well, I'm pro-choice, but I still wouldn't do that. That would be offensive.
Would you tell them how Catholics are just motivated by the desire to feel superior to others or to tell others what to do?
No, I assume that Catholics are motivated by their understanding of God and of what God requires of us.
Yet many meat eaters refuse to accept that vegans are motivated by their understanding of what morality requires of us.
So why do you do it? Why not just keep your veganism to yourself?
Because that would be wrong.
I don't see why. You're not making them eat meat. It's not your job to ensure other people's morality. Like how you don't have to go around making sure your neighbours aren't cheating on their spouses. Each of us is only responsible for the morality of our own actions.
That might be true in general, but I think this issue is a special case.
What's so special about it?
First of all, for most of the wrongs of the past, slavery, colonialism, the oppression of women, the victims could and did speak up. In the present case, the victims will never be able to act or speak for themselves. There is no one to speak against what we humans are doing except us. So we have to do it. If we don't, it will never stop.
I don't think I want to do that. It's going to be really awkward if every time I eat a meal with someone, I start telling them that they're immoral.
Let me give you another analogy. Remember the My Lai massacre?
That was a mass killing in Asia, right?
Yeah, during the Vietnam War, American soldiers wiped out an entire village of Vietnamese civilians.
That's awful.
Say you're one of the soldiers. Some of your colleagues are shooting villagers and dumping them in a mass grave. The villagers are completely unarmed. They can't even plead for their lives because they don't speak English. What do you do?
Well, I wouldn't shoot the villagers.
In fact, some soldiers declined to participate, as you suggest. But that wasn't good enough. Then the rest of the soldiers just went on killing.
Well, what would you suggest?
There's no one else there besides the soldiers and the villagers. The villagers can't do anything to stop the massacre, so it has to be on the soldiers. The ones who know that it's wrong have to try to stop it.
But how could I stop it?
I don't know, but I think at a minimum, you should tell the other soldiers that they're committing a war crime and that they have to stop.
I doubt that would work. They'd probably just keep doing it anyway.
Maybe so, but you should at least try. You shouldn't just stand by and watch because, it's going to be socially awkward if I point out that my buddies are committing a war crime, or because people are going to think I'm judgmental.
But if I make people really uncomfortable, they're not going to stop eating meat. They'll just stop talking to me.
Fair point. So you need to strike a balance between staying silent in the face of a great wrong and alienating most other people. You need to make the point that meat eating is wrong, but in a calm and rational manner, so you don't sound crazy.
Speaking of crazy, don't you think some of your analogies are a little overblown, comparing meat eating to being a Nazi or a slave master or massacring a village of civilians? I don't claim to be a saint or anything, but I'm hardly a Nazi just because I enjoy the occasional burger.
Many people feel that way. That's another reason why people keep eating meat, even after they know that it's wrong.
What, because we're not saints?
Nor do we want to be. Most people have a certain tolerance for immorality in themselves. They don't aspire to be ideal, they just want to be not too bad, morally speaking.
Yeah, I'm only human. Like, sometimes I stretch the truth when I'm trying to impress a date. I know it's wrong, but I'm not trying to be perfect. Anyway, I make up for it by being very nice.
Yeah, this isn't like that. The arguments we've been discussing don't suggest that meat eating is a minor foible, like lying to impress your date. The argument suggests that human meat consumption, taken as a whole, may be literally the greatest problem in the world.
Yeah, I know, 74 billion animals and all, but any given person only contributes a tiny amount of that harm.
True, you contribute only a tiny percentage of it, but the tiny percentage is still extremely harmful. If you keep eating meat, you're probably going to eat over 2,000 land animals in your lifetime.
2,000? I don't believe that.
Well, if you eat meat at every meal, 3 times a day, that's 3 times 365, that's over 1,000 meat dishes a year, right?
Right.
The average American lives 79 years, so that's over 79,000 meat dishes in a lifetime. How many animals do you think would be needed to provide 79,000 meat dishes?
But I don't eat meat at every meal.
Okay, what if you do it half the time? Then you still eat about 40,000 meat dishes in a lifetime. It's still plausible that over 2,000 animals would have to be killed to provide that.
I thought your argument was all about causing suffering, not about killing.
Yeah, I'm just using the numbers killed as a proxy for the number of animals that are subjected to extreme suffering. Subjecting more than 2,000 other creatures to agony would be the worst thing you did in your life, by far.
Alright, but it's still not like being a Nazi.
No? Why not?
Well, everyone knows that killing people is wrong. Most of us don't know that eating meat is wrong.
The Nazis didn't know that killing Jews was wrong either. Many of them thought that it was morally right. Some of them talked about steeling themselves to do their duty.
Okay, but everyone should know that it's wrong to murder people.
Everyone should also know that it's wrong to inflict severe pain and suffering for trivial reasons.
Okay, but not everyone knows that the meat industry does that.
And most Nazis didn't know when they first became Nazis, or when they helped ship people to concentration camps, that Hitler was going to order everyone in the camps to be executed.
Hey, are you defending Nazis now?
That wasn't my intention. Nevertheless, the people we see as villains are rarely as diabolical as we imagine them, and the people we see as decent, including ourselves, are rarely as decent as we imagine them. The gap between the Nazi officer and the average American is much smaller than we think. Both are, for the most part, simply going along with what those around them are saying and doing, without thinking too hard about what is right or wrong, or trying too hard to be good or bad. One just happens to live in a society in which a genocide is being carried out.
That's pretty intense. I'm gonna need to think about all this before changing my lifestyle.
Fair enough, but don't put it off for too long. The sad truth is that most evil is done by people who never made up their minds to be either good or evil.